And you should always look first as to how am I doing things myself? Could I be doing things solo a lot more efficiently to save time, XXX? Oftentimes, yes, as we know, working with OTA students and, just working in our own jobs, that I always recommend going that route first. But then if you've looked at that space and you're like, I'm doing things efficiently, it's literally a scale problem, then it goes back to my first point of like, what holes need to be filled? Where are there gaps? And what do you not want to fill? And I feel like, again, from a high level, that's really where a lot of the thinking starts.
This is the Online Trainer Show, Trainer Show, Trainer Show. This is the Online Trainer Show. We shouldn't have a podcast.
That was one of the few times I spoke because John was telling the Pornhub story. And of course, I was not talking because I literally, last time I was doing the podcast, I muted my mic and did work. Because the first episode I was on, I tried to speak and just found out that was an awful idea right off the bat. So he was telling the Pornhub story, classic, and he left out the part where I had to share my screen with the whole company. So I had to unmute myself. I was like, okay, yes, I had to research Pornhub, but the worst part was I had to share my screen when I was relatively new to the company. I mean, not crazy new, but and be like, hey, so look at these categories here. Look at how they've really brilliant way that they do this. And see, you can get all these different fetishes and like you check the box. It's a checkbox and then it deletes. And so that was one of the few times I spoke. But yeah, I mean,
that's outstanding.
What an experience.
So today is kind of revenge. So today you get to talk a lot.
Yes.
And so we'll make up for the fact that you didn't get an opportunity to chat a lot last time.
I can't wait. I was going into my first episode thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to drop some knowledge bombs on the podcast, and just completely the wrong mindset to be in going into the podcast.
Yeah. With John and Ren there, anytime you try to do something like super productive, just,
I mean, for our serial listeners, possibly people remember this, but at the end of the first episode, I want to say it was 101, 102, something around there. First of all, John hated the title that I came up with, which I know you resonate with.
He always hates everything I choose.
And Ren made the grave error of saying, "Do you have any last thoughts, Alex?" So I'm like, in my mind, obviously I've had thoughts this entire time, but I feel weird sharing them because it doesn't feel like the right time. So then I went into me, like my normal, deeper, like principle-based thinking. And literally I finished talking and there's just like dead silence for about 3 seconds. And John and Red are just like, what was that? Like, no, this is not a place for productivity. That was too well thought out. This is not the place. So I was like, got it.
Yeah. Absolute value has no place here.
No. Which is great. I mean, I just came in, and I had listened to the podcast. And the thing is, I got value from it. So I was like, hey, I'm going to provide value my own way, but learned very quickly that was not the way to do it.
Well, we get to do it our way today, which I'm so excited.
I'm excited to hear you talk. I feel like the whole time I was on it, they told me we miss Ant. They just wanted you back the whole time. So I was like, fine.
I don't talk much.
Right.
I communicate holding up signs. That's my job.
Right. It's the facial expressions. And I had no expressions because I muted myself and worked. So I literally didn't even know what was happening. And because I was like, oh, it's actually beneficial if I don't talk. So I'm like, I might as well be productive. So like, you don't even react. I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying.
Yeah. I think they like making me blush because I turn red so easily and I'm so easily embarrassed. So like every few episodes, my face just gets really flushed. I'm like, I can't believe you said that, or what you just suggested, or please don't go where I think you're going. So it's just.
And then they do.
Yeah, exactly.
I won't even attempt Ren's slow jam. I mean, it's such a unique.
No one can.
Unique brilliance. You can't. Yeah, you can't. You can't replace that, but I'll definitely try to make you blush in other ways, but I mean, we'll see what happens.
We will see. So today we're talking about hiring other coaches and team members, which you have definitely a lot of experience in as a former head coach for OTA level 1, and then obviously running OTC, or online trainer coaching. So I look forward to hearing your knowledge bombs for the subject.
It's definitely something I love thinking about. And I love the operations side of the product life, but I love the human side of it even more. And I'm been diving a lot into leadership principles and, what makes a good leader. And a lot of it is like your employees, you work for your employees as a leader. And so I just love diving into this topic. So yeah, I'm super happy you asked me to be on for this one.
Yeah, and you've been doing the Harvard, what now, business school, something.
Yeah, I was taking a Harvard Business School class called Disruptive Strategy, and it was basically the science of innovation, basically, and how to recognize. This wasn't as much in a leadership sphere, but how to recognize where there's ripeness for disruption, basically in a marketplace, and how to disrupt, and how do you innovate in a space. And we looked at examples like the Netflix versus Blockbuster type of thinking, or like how did Target become a thing, and it's all based in the market was ripe enough for this disruption. And obviously we're building out a SaaS product right now, and so that we're trying to disrupt the space. And so yeah, I was enrolled in that class for 6 weeks. I think it was 6-7 weeks, and I finished that up about a month ago. It was
nice,
super great. And I have all the information, by the way, if you're ever curious. I can share all the study guide stuff.
Anything I can do to procrastinate and
yes,
not do other stuff sounds right up my alley. So
it'll only be semi-procrastination, because it'll be,
it's productive procrastination.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
it. Like I'm doing something. It's like doing dishes when I should be, doing laundry or something.
Exactly. Right.
So when we're talking about hiring coaches, like how do we even recognize when the right time is? And whether it's coaches or other team members, but like, how do you know when it's about that time to start looking at it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And from my perspective, there's two different kind of lines of thinking here. The first overarching one, before you even know it's time, I think is really self-awareness. What are your skill sets? Where do you thrive? This is kind of a moot point for a lot of solopreneurs, because it's just them. And so, you usually have to do everything, and that's okay. And I think that you can definitely do that for a little while. But when you start to develop your business a little bit more, having the self-awareness as to, first of all, where's my skill set at? What kind of activities do I thrive in? What's missing? What does my business need in order to continue thriving? Is really crucial, because if you don't have that information, even when you start to think, okay, I'm so overworked, I don't want to do all this work anymore, I don't want to spend time on these things, it's really helpful to understand what do you want to continue spending time on from just your own desire standpoint, but then also what's going to benefit the business for me to spend time on. We're going through a great transition in the PTDC where our roles are becoming more specialized. We're focusing on one thing, which is great, right? That's like
so excited.
You have to share your thoughts with me about that. But that's really all I have to say about that first point. Is like, you should understand always, even before you start looking for employees, have the self-awareness on where your strengths and weaknesses are, so that when you start to look for other people, you have these holes identified, and most likely you're gonna fill the biggest hole in that with that gap, like wherever that may be, and what your business needs. And the other piece of it is, how do you know it's time? This is really, again, back to self-awareness, but a lot of keys are, has your business stalled? What are you spending your time on? And can you be more efficient with your systems? Or is it that you're efficient as you can be internally and you literally can't handle the workload? I find oftentimes people will hire out when the former is present, where they're not being as efficient as they could be with their systems, but they're spending a lot of time on things. And you should always look first as to how am I doing things myself? Could I be doing things solo a lot more efficiently to save time, XXX? Oftentimes, yes, as we know, working with OTA students and, just working in our own jobs, that I always recommend going that route first. But then if you've looked at that space and you're like, I'm doing things efficiently, it's literally a scale problem, then it goes back to my first point of like, what holes need to be filled? Where are there gaps? And what do you not want to fill? And I feel like, again, from a high level, that's really where a lot of the thinking starts.
Yeah. And we touch on this a good bit in the academy, understanding the value of your time is really important.
Yeah.
And kind of knowing your zones of genius. And so kind of touching back on, the things that you're interested in doing. Like if you love designing and creating posts and stuff like that, then obviously that's where you should be putting some of your time in because it helps generate sales and all that good stuff. But like maybe you hate writing and writing posts just totally stresses you out. There's no reason that you actually have to be the one to do it. If you are better at doing sales calls or connecting with people one-on-one, spend your time there and then you can hire out that weak point instead of trying to force yourself into something that you despise doing.
I mean, and especially if you've came to the conclusion of writing is going to be paramount to my business growth and my success, and like you despise it and you're bad at it, great. I mean, if you're able to get to a point, because obviously from a resource perspective, from a financial perspective, you might not be able to hire someone immediately, but at least that's how you know where you can go first. And that line of thinking can manifest into a bunch of different things.
I mean, if you can make a sale and then, within an hour for $300 a month, but you could have hired someone for $30 an hour to write a few posts for you. Obviously it makes a little bit more sense to hire that out.
For sure. The only counter thought I'll have, because it's a slippery slope, and we've seen this before, where you have to recognize where it's valuable to have you in that seat and not someone else. And with content, with like conversations, oftentimes it either has to be you, or you have to convey that it's you if it's not you. And that's super challenging to do. We see a lot of people hire out like for DMs, which is fine.
I've heard so many stories about this.
But it's like that, that will create, if someone gets any glimmer of the fact that it's not you, their whole perspective has changed of the whole conversation. I mean, they probably won't even respond. And so it takes a lot of strategic work to, make sure that that's now when it comes to doing back-end work or hiring a VA to respond to customer support emails or whatever, it's less crucial that is you as a person. But if you're a service-based industry, like we are, and you're trying to build relationships, your authenticity as you is going to be a huge piece of that. And so just recognizing, because sure, you're bad at DMs, you don't like it, that could be a place where it's valuable to learn and get better as yourself, even before you hire someone, because you have to be guiding the person you hire, because it has to come from you. And so it's like, it's this fine line with understanding that, I feel like, as well.
Yeah, totally agree. So let's say we recognized where we're supposed to, that we're at the point where we want to hire someone, whether it's another coach or another team member, maybe for admin or what have you. So how do we know what kind of coach we're wanting to hire? And this may not even be a question that a lot of people think of, but there's really kind of two big types of coaches that we would be looking at. And that's a decision you need to make ahead of time before you start looking.
And what are the types of coaches?
So you have complementary coaches. So someone who is going to offer a different viewpoint, a different skill, a different way of doing things than how you do them. John is really big on doing this, for example. So a lot of our recent hires are someone who challenges the way some of us think. Like you and I think very similarly.
Yes.
And with John, like none of us really care about money a whole lot. But that's where like Jason comes in. Like he's very smart with marketing and kind of behind the scenes processes and stuff like that.
Numbers. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, literally a rocket scientist. So like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
So having someone that thinks so differently from us, helps us find a middle ground. So that would be a complementary type hire. And so they can challenge the way that you think. They can help you look at something from a different perspective. And then you have someone who's supplementary, someone that does your job the way that you do it. So if you want
For
someone
sure.
to take over exactly your type of clients and do the same process and, exactly like you do, then you're wanting a supplementary coach or admin staff.
And I think it brings up a really interesting point because, I mean, obviously that's going to depend on what are your needs. If you are hiring someone because you can't scale and you need to, clone yourself, quote unquote, which I would love to dive deeper into because I have a lot of thoughts on like how to nurture a coach. But if you basically need to clone yourself and be a supplementary coach, then great. Like if you're efficient, you like what you do, you want to continue what you do, but like you have a lot of business. I mean, that seems like a great time to hire a supplementary coach. If you're hiring someone because either to fill a hole that you can't fill it, and literally every time I say fill a hole, I just can't help but think of what John and Red would say.
Yeah, I can hear them in
on
the
this
back of my head
podcast.
for sure.
I can hear them, and now I'm just saying it for the sake of it.
Now we'll know if they actually listen to this episode because they will bring it up later.
No, they will definitely bring it up. As soon as it airs, I'll get a text from John for sure. Just quote, fill the hole, eh? I'll say fill the gap. And what was I saying? Yes. Yeah. If you need someone to, like you said, complement your skill set, where it's just like, I need a backend developer because this gap that I have in my business is like, I need to automate things from a development standpoint, from a code standpoint, and you're awful at that. Well, now it's hopefully clear that you don't want someone to be like you. And to me, it goes back to the self-awareness of just like, where are you at? Where are your strengths? What do you need? Hopefully that should dictate that question.
What are your thoughts about doing, like, when you're first starting to hire people, starting with supplementary or complementary? Like, do you think it matters which one you start with? Is there an appropriate time for one or the other?
It's all situational based. I mean, I could see two completely different businesses with different goals hiring different things. I mean, for a company like us, we're larger than the average, OTA student that we work with. We're at a point now where we need huge gaps where we need a dedicated financial person. We need a dedicated developer. We need a dedicated research person. A lot of people, it's just not necessary to do. So now if it is, great. And if you have goals to scale and you have maybe funding or you just have a lot of available resources or whatever it may be, great. But I think for most people, especially people in our ecosystem, OTA students, people listening, I would assume the majority of people are at a point where they just can't handle the workload and they need to bring someone else on to basically do what they do, but with their other business, because either they don't want to work more or they actually can't handle the business that's coming in, which is, I mean, that's a great problem to have. And it's often an easier transition and easier to find someone to supplement what you do. So I think for most people that will probably be the first hire. At least that's I think, you can correct me, but that's what we see in OTA more often than not. And it's, that is a very strategic process because this is what we do in OTA. This is what we do in OTC. They're all supplementary. We have values and we want them to live those values and work with our students because they're representing our company. And so I would be curious to hear your thoughts because I know I started hiring OTA mentors and you've kind of taken that reign this year. Just kind of any thoughts you have around what you look for potentially, or things that aren't super common. Obviously they have to have, they have to run a business. They have to meet these certain skill sets. But we handpick all of our coaches. And so I know I have my thoughts, but when you look for coaches by yourself, and when you onboard and train them, do you have any insights as to how you found that process to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the mentors that, we've hired, we're active in our social media networks. And so, finding people that tend to naturally want to help others. And when you see their name pop up, kind of like the similar idea of being famous overnight, you see that name a lot and you start paying more attention to them. And when someone is naturally helpful, like to me, that means a lot. So that's something
Yeah.
that always catches my attention. And if I don't have someone offhand, then I work within our network from our current mentors, because they have close relationships with other coaches and seeing who they might recommend, because they understand the job. So
Sure.
they would be able to make a good recommendation. So that's usually how we find someone. I tend not to like the idea of doing a job, posting or anything like
Yeah.
that for this particular job, just because I want it to be a referral based. I want more
Mm.
background information than kind of taking a chance.
Which, I mean, some great lessons from that, from like people listening. I'm always thinking about the asymmetric opportunities of like what has such a high reward with minimal time and minimal risk. And like networking is always atop of that list. And like being genuinely helpful without expecting anything in return.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like the two things I took away from your thoughts right there. And like, I genuinely feel like those two things are so powerful, but they don't produce an immediate, investment. They don't produce tangible results oftentimes, but they plant so many seeds for so many people that like when opportunities arise, you're off in there. And I mean, this is a cornerstone of what we teach in OTA of like, oh, you started a new conversation or you made a new connection today and you kind of hit it off and, you're going to talk again. They're not a client yet, but like what a great step forward that is. And that's totally how we hire our coaches for sure. I mean, it's like we see people in our community being genuinely helpful, not self-serving. Maybe they connect with us and see how they can help us. I mean, it's a lesson in like doing the small things that are kind of selfless, that aren't self-serving, but like are just genuinely helpful. And man, that goes such a long way, doesn't it?
I will take someone with a good attitude and the right mindset, and
Yes.
I have to teach them the skills any day of the week before someone who happens to have all of the skills and a crappy attitude.
Yes.
So we always seem to look for people with the right mindset that will fit our culture, our company culture well,
Yes.
and is coachable. The skill
Totally.
sets we can always teach. So that's usually a further down on the list of requirements.
What are things you found that are not necessarily unteachable, but almost unteachable, that, I mean, more challenging to teach aside from like, obviously the skills that we have to teach them, our systems? Like what are things you look for that are like, man, that's tough to instill in someone if they don't have it?
Empathy is a really big one.
Yes.
And curiosity would be another one. Like I find, not that it's not teachable, but it's very counter to the way some people think. And so a lot of people, a student may come to them with a question in theory and like they just provide the answer instead of being like, okay, here's the question, but like, why did you ask that question? Is that even the right question that you meant to ask? Maybe you meant something different. And so having a natural state of curiosity is really important. And that can be difficult to teach if your brain just doesn't work that way. That can be incredibly difficult. Not that you can't, but that would be a challenge. And then the empathy. What about you?
It's something that we're not taking on to teach people. I mean, it's like, that's why we look for, it's like, we're not going to teach people empathy. Yeah, exactly. We can try, but like, I mean, definitely empathy was the first thing that came to my mind when I asked that question, for sure. Strong communication skills of just like, do you know how to communicate your point in a way that other people will understand? And I think that's rooted in empathy a lot of times. But I think there are other communication skills. And again, you can teach that. But the example I always give where it's hard to teach communication compared to other skills is like, we will read some people's DMs sometimes that they send us and like, why didn't I make this sale? And it's just like, there's a disconnect between the person and who they're talking to. And they like don't naturally build rapport with people, and they don't make people feel comfortable. And they don't, show people that I understand you and I'm on your side without like literally just saying those words. That's a skill that I think is so valuable that I certainly look for when I was hiring mentors. And I don't even know exactly what that is, but it's probably a combination of empathy and communication and being able to read between the lines and critical thinking, interpersonal skills. I mean, it's that. And like, at least for me, when someone will send me that DM and say, what did I do wrong? It's hard to pinpoint, like, it's hard to say, do this differently. Cause it's almost like change your interpersonal skills. Be more relatable, like speak like, oh,
A human.
be a human. It's like when they said this thing and you didn't acknowledge how they felt and you just asked them, well, how are you going to solve that? That doesn't make someone feel like they're heard, and it's like hard to dive into that in like a 3-sentence response of like, here's what to change. Like, oh, I would ask this question first. It's like, no, it's beyond that.
Yeah, it's a whole series of conversations over months and months of work.
Right. And which, we will do in Advantage, but it's, for me at least, when I was mentoring, I would tackle things like that before I'd even tackle, here's how you say things. And it's tough for people because it's like, it feels like we're not making any progress. But from a long-term perspective, this is what's going to make the biggest difference. If you can learn how to relate to people via your communication and like express yourself in a way that they understand and have people know that you get them and care for them, like that is going to be what will make such a big difference. If that's not there, whether you ask this question first or you say this thing, or like you put an exclamation point or emojis, like that's a Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a good idea of maybe who we're looking for, but let's say, okay, we're going to put out, information that we are looking for someone. How do we kind of get started with like an application process? We kind of talked a little bit about selection, like how do we actually choose? But how do we set ourselves up for success so that way we're choosing the right people and being clear about what the job is?
I mean, in my ideal world, you would have a network of people where you could go to someone and ask them where an application wouldn't be successful, wouldn't be necessary. I mean, we rarely put out applications. Now, we're in a unique position, of course. But I think for a lot of people, they could do that. In fact, I think a lot of people in our network could hire each other for various things successfully by just reaching out and understanding. Of course, I mean, it goes back to understanding like who needs to be in this role, what skills they need to have, what are you looking for? You can have a short list of people. I mean, we always do this with OTA mentors. We have a short list of people. We contact the first one. If they say no, we contact the next one. I mean, I like that approach because it's personal. It makes the other person feel great that you reached out to them. But it's almost the same with an application too. I mean, the only other thing with the application, aside from understanding what it is that you really need and being sure you can communicate that where the person reading it will understand, is like going back to empathy. You need to understand the applicant. Why is it beneficial to them? I mean, this is something that a lot of applications miss, I feel like, or job postings or whatever it may be, is like, why is it appealing to the person who's reading it? You want to attract a skilled worker who's going to be really bought in to what you're doing. How are they going to be rewarded? Not even financially, but just like, which, by the way, side comment, people who don't include salaries in job postings, that should be illegal these days.
It is now in Colorado. You have to post it in Colorado.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, but a lot of job posting places now will not accept online applicants if they're from Colorado because of this law.
Why? It's so dumb to me. I mean, yes, if you're putting out a job posting and you're not transparent about the salary, it's going to give you a lot of headaches down the line, negotiations. I mean, yes, I get the psychology behind it, but we could have a whole separate conversation about that. But,
but it's like when you're charging, you want to be paid what you're worth, and you
right.
ask that when you get clients. Here's what my time is worth. You should understand what the job is worth and pay people what they're valued at. And there should be no hiding that or trying to be tricky. Like if you have that kind of mindset, almost kind of like a scarcity mindset, you shouldn't be hiring people, frankly.
Well, for sure. And I mean, the reality is you can pay people if you can teach someone the entire job, you can pay people a lot less for that job than if you're bringing someone in for their mind. And so I think you have to recognize, like, are you bringing someone in to help make decisions for you? That's hard to replace. Mm-hmm. If so, you're going to have to pay a lot more because they're going to be sought after a lot more. And you want them to be bought in. Rather, if you're paying someone to do data entry or something that pretty much anyone on earth, you could teach them how to do it, of course you want them to be bought in, and of course you want to convey the value to them and the skill set, and you need work ethic and blah blah blah. But oftentimes you won't have to pay them as much because it's something that anyone can do. And I think recognizing where you are in that position and just knowing if you're bringing someone in as a thought person and a strategy person and a decision person who you can't teach that really. And so just know that, and again, I understand a lot of people probably aren't in that position, but for the people who are, I mean, that's just the reality of that.
Well, that's the perceived value part, right? Like when we talk about
Right.
pricing our services, they may literally do X and Y, but they provide a lot of value beyond the actual thing that they do.
Yes.
And you pay more for that. It just is what it is.
Rightfully so.
It save you a huge headache and potential loss and frustration, and you will pay dearly for it, but it's worth it.
It's totally worth it, because those are the people, I mean, the people who will make the right decisions for you are the people who they won't accept the job if they feel like they're underpaid. I mean, no one should, but you will not attract the right talent and put out the right message if you're looking for a decision partner or hire, if you're anywhere close to underpaying. And I mean, now, once you're in that position, you can probably start researching like what is an appropriate pay for this person. I always start with Google for a lot of things, but yeah, I mean, it's something a lot of people don't realize, but those people are not replaceable. Not to say, and I hate to be in the mindset of like, oh, your data entry, you're replaceable. But the reality is, if it's a process that anyone can learn, you are more replaceable. Unfortunately, I mean, it's just, I think everyone understands.
It doesn't take as much time or money to train someone, but the more difficult the onboarding process, the worse it is to have to hire someone, and it's more expensive to have to hire someone because you have to start from scratch. I would rather pay someone more and give them raises as appropriate instead of having to hire someone from scratch, because that's just a nightmare.
I mean, imagine if we had to rehire someone in your position, nightmare.
I know. You're
I would have to go take it back over again.
Too many places.
Exactly. That's been our strategy for the past 5 years. Exactly. Is just be so integrated that they can't fire us. Something I feel. What's that?
And we just challenged John.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a skill in and of itself, for sure.
But we did. I told you to tell him a long time ago, the only way he's allowed to fire me is if he sends me a "Bye Felicia" gif. So until he does that is the only way he's allowed to fire me.
I forgot about that. That's good. Yeah, I don't think he's thinking about firing you anytime soon. So
nah, he does.
I think we're safe. Yeah. Me, on the other hand, no, I'm just kidding. Something I feel strongly about, though, and I think, once you get a coach in your system, it is, or any hire, and this is more for supplementary. This is how I hire for OTC. This is how we hire for OTA. It is a science and an art as to how you train these coaches. Now a lot of people are fitness and nutrition coaches listening to this. It is a very fine balance between you want the coaches that you bring in. You brought them in for a reason, first and foremost. They have their own unique set of skills. Now, sure, they're a fitness coach just like you, but what makes them great is going to be slightly different than what makes you great. And you don't want to put them in such a small box that now what makes them great is no longer, like, you don't want to put them in the same exact box as you, for instance. But on the other side of that, they're representing your company. So they have to adhere to a certain set of values. And this is where looking for people, because you want to find people who probably naturally align with your values, but you also want to coach people like, this is what we represent. This is what we value. How you do that, I leave that up to you. And you want to give the coach freedom to do that, so they feel like they don't have to always be checking with you on things. And they always have to do it your way. As long as they're in the right state of mind and in the right framework, do it however you want. I mean, this is something I do in OTC a ton, which OTC, is our fitness service, online trainer coaching. And like, we have a lot of great coaches. All of them are OTA2 grads. They're awesome, but each person is unique. We have Ren is a coach, although he's leaving. And, we have Ren, and we have Chloe, and we have Jeff, who's a bodybuilder, and we have Mish, who is also like a bodybuilder. Like, everyone is a little bit different as to who they are. And so I won't give them scripts to send to people, because how could I possibly write a script that captures each person's authenticity and approach and what they care about? I don't even tell people like, you have to send this in a video form. You have to, it's like, here's the message that I need you to get across. Do it however you want. And it's finding that balance of like, you have to give people the framework, the guidelines. You have to stay within this. And so you have to understand what are the things that you need people to stay within. I don't want my coaches doing completely, like providing completely different services. We all have to be in line with what we're providing. How you deliver that, how you respond to a client, should change. And I tell my OTC coaches all the time, which they'll ask me, like, how should I respond to this? You can probably guess my first question back. How would you respond to this? I mean, this is your client. Like, yes, they're in our system, but if one of your own clients outside of us came to you and said this, I'm okay if you respond that way. And the reality is that's going to be different. Mish is going to respond differently than Ren. Ren's going to respond differently than Chloe, who's going to respond differently than Katie. But as long as I feel like they're in the right frame of mind where I'm like, you need to empathize with them and ensure that they know this, say it however you want, their authenticity in saying that is going to go so much further than me saying, here, let me write this script for you to send. That will often create a disconnect. And so there's just this really fine balance between ensuring your coaches are representing your company and your values, and ensuring that you're not putting them in such a small box that they feel like they can't blossom and be who they really are, because that's why you hired them in the first place.
Yeah, you can't let your team feel scared to take action, because then you might as well just do the job yourself. And so I know when I onboard a new mentor, I always tell them, if your actions were in your mind in the best interest of our students, short of, and even if you accidentally deleted all of the OTA, we have it backed up somewhere. Like, worst case scenario, we fix it. Right. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Like, there is nothing that you do that could be that big of a deal unless it was like malicious in some way.
And that's up to us to structure it where they can't mess things up.
Exactly. But if you truly want to have a business where you can walk away and feel good about it, you can't put such tight reins on everything to where they don't feel the ability to make decisions to do good things.
They're not you, and you don't want them to be you.
No.
Exactly.
No, and then you lose out on potential ideas and growth and insights when you try to micromanage people that way, and it's stressful for everyone, and then they just won't stay. So
it's awful for the employees. The manager won't stay because now you hired people to not do that job anymore, but then you're just managing people who are doing that job, aka doing the job. And if you're micromanaging, and then you can't do what your real job is supposed to be, and like you said, everyone's unhappy, and it's not a recipe. Now, what this means for the manager too, and I know this is something that we've gone through, people will mess up. Like, that is the downside. That's the risk of giving people that freedom, is people will make mistakes, and that is 100% okay. I mean, we should structure things where people can't mess up so bad that it's a catastrophe for the business. I mean, sure, of course it could always happen, but like that should be
our fault. Then it's not theirs. That's our responsibility.
Right. We should give them the safety to explore. And if they mess up, maybe it rubs the customer the wrong. I mean, maybe there's a minor downside to that, but it shouldn't be, it ruins the company. I mean, and they should feel like they can make the mistakes. That, unfortunately, with autonomy and freedom, I mean, we're humans. So it's going to happen regardless. And as a manager,
learn. I mean,
for sure.
And that's how we learn. And so trying to set them up where we expect them to be perfect at everything, not going to happen.
No. And as a manager, you have to embrace their mistakes. Don't make them feel awful for making a mistake. Position it as a learning process. I know from my experience that they will probably feel worse than you if they make a mistake. 100%. And it's like, it's not our job they're thinking it already. We don't need to say, why'd you do this? I mean, of course you can always have a conversation, but like, going the route of not attacking them necessarily, but really diving into the mistake, they're probably thinking about that already, and they know they messed up. And from my perspective, a more valuable approach is, okay, it happened. Like, what can we learn moving forward? What can we adjust so that this same exact thing doesn't happen again? We can't go back and change the past. Obviously, if you need to do some coaching as to like, they didn't know they messed up, or, then you might have to shine light on it. But oftentimes they will, especially if they come to you or something. And you can make them feel like it's a lesson and a positive experience by saying, first of all, hey, it's okay. Let's chat about like what we can take away from this. And that's really all we can do. That also puts them in a mindset of, oh, I can mess up and it's not the end of the world. I'm going to continue taking risks, because oftentimes the rewards from those risks will heavily outweigh the downsides.
Yeah. And I was listening to a book, Psychology of Money, and they were talking about Amazon as an example. And so they have all of these different avenues of ways to make money, and fully expecting some to fail. And that's just part of the business, is that some things will fail, but because they've tried all of these different things, they end up, recuperating it in other areas. And it's kind of the same idea here, is you have to have room to screw up in order to find by accident the things that work really well. And it's just so much easier when they feel safe to do that and explore, and to be able to come to you and know that it's not the end of the world. I know I get messages sometimes from the mentors like, oh, I did this thing. I'm like, that was actually not a big deal at all.
Yeah. That's kind of good.
They will tell themselves 9 times out of 10, and it's
I know
nothing.
And if they don't, then that's another bad sign.
Well, then obviously we may not have done a great hire. But
right. Rare. Or, of course there's the possibility. I always give people the benefit of the doubt, unless it's a pattern of theirs. I just assume they don't know. They don't recognize that it's a mistake. So, hey, let's just chat about it. If it continues to happen, well, that's another conversation for sure. But if it's a one-time mistake, of course, you can make one-time severe mistakes that are unfortunately too big to say, okay, let's forget about it. But I am hard pressed to find a lot of one-time minor errors that like will change my opinion of somebody, or will produce anger. Obviously, if it's an intent of like, you weren't respectful to a person, like it speaks to their character. But, outside of kind of extreme situations like that, one-time mistakes are almost more positive than negative.
Yep. 1000%.
Because they learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have a few minutes left. So last thoughts, tips that you would encourage for hiring, managing other coaches, admin staff?
Yeah, the other kind of bigger thing that I get asked semi-often, I assume you do too, is like, how do I pay people? And, from a fitness perspective, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, but from a coaching perspective, there's a lot of different factors to think about. So like for OTC, for instance, are we giving people clients? Do they have to bring in their own clients? That's going to significantly impact what percentage you give them. Are you an independent trainer using the space, or are you work for a gym that gives you clients? Obviously, if you're giving your coaches clients, you can give them the minority of the money because they are just they work for you. They're operating under your people. If you're a contractor for a space and you're bringing people in, or, you run an online training organization that, hey, we provide you the platform, you bring your own clients, they should be getting the majority of the money because they're doing a lot of the work. For OTC, obviously we provide them the clients. What amount of work are they doing? Like for OTC, we have Joe Dowdell, who does the bulk of like the back end for the programming for all the clients. And our coaches are more of an ongoing accountability, ongoing adaptations kind of position. And so it's like, they're not building the programs. Each individual coach aren't building the programs from scratch. So that's something else to consider. If you're giving them the client and then they're doing everything for you, aside from getting the actual client, like you're going to be closer to 50% now of the money, 30, 40%. If they're doing less, you can be less. So it's understanding what work that they're doing is really crucial. The other thing, and again, we do this in OTC as well, is like you totally want to incentivize your trainers to retain their clients. I mean, we basically double our coaches' pay for all the clients that they retain, because it's like, that's all them. And it goes back to thinking like, is this them or is this us? When they retain their clients, that's because they coach them for 12 weeks. And like, we give them, like, we're like, okay, then this is all yours now. And so you definitely want to incentivize the coach to, retain the people that they work with, because they're going to continue getting fed clients. And oftentimes, of course, some coaches will have that motivation already, and they should. But oftentimes, if you're going to keep getting fed clients, you don't view them as your own clients. It's like, I'm just working for these people's clients. And if you obviously do the things we talked about earlier, and kind of couple that with incentivizing them to retain the clients by saying, hey, these are yours. Like, sure, they're coming from us, but you get this bonus for all these clients you retain. That's a really nice way to position the, like, do things your own way within our framework type of thing. So obviously you can get more specific than that, but like, that's the other kind of high level piece that I feel like gets asked quite a bit. It's like, what do I pay people who come to work for me? It's like, it really depends on what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can always dig into like the cost per, client acquisition, right? So like, how much did it cost me in order to get them as a client? So you can get into like really fine details, which is usually more of a later kind of thing. You might want a number cruncher for that if that's not your thing. But understanding how much it cost you to get them in the first place through marketing, hours spent, that kind of stuff, overhead costs, for you and for the coach. Do they have to pay for their own software? Do they have to pay for anything in order to do their job that you're not providing? Are they an independent contractor versus an employee? Because that changes things too, because of taxes and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Then there's the legal stuff.
There's the legal side, in which case you're going to want to kind of check to see what in your area. And so finding, a CPA could be a good place to start. And I know in the US we have, SCORE, the volunteer-based program by the Small Business Administration, which has volunteers, which can help, answer those kind of questions, lawyers, CPAs, all sorts of people. So if you're in the US, and a lot of other countries have something similar to it, that can be a great place to get more kind of local advice. But the foundation of where to start will be who's doing the bulk of the work. Totally.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And notice we don't touch on the legal stuff. That's a whole different beast that, I would be reluctant to say you should learn and ensure you have a good solid foundation from an expert. But that's not something that we dive into, and that's our scope with OTA as well. And sure, we provide principles, but that's go to an expert for that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's an area we don't guess in.
We don't guess in, and it's not even worth providing high level. We do to a degree, but like high level specificities, because it's like there's going to be so many variances, and you just want to be sure. Obviously in the OTA, we provide a lot. We work with a law firm to provide the legal forms and stuff like that. And we still recommend just run these by, a local lawyer, a local accountant, whatever it may be.
County sometimes the difference is, so there's literally no way for us to do that.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Not even country to country, county to county. Exactly. Which is just like, so just be sure that nothing's awry there. But yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think we hit on a lot of really good stuff. I'll be anxious to hear the nonsense that comes from Ren and John if they do decide to listen. So, hey guys, if you are listening. So you can get the show notes, onlinetrainer.com/podcast. And of course, the show is sponsored by the Online Trainer Academy. If you're a coach in the health and fitness industry and you want to help more people while creating more freedom for yourself, enroll in the Online Trainer Academy to learn how to build your online business today. Visit onlinetrainer.com/academy to learn more, and you will get more fun stuff like this and help with your business, and hopefully get to the point where you can hire more people so you can do your own thing and enjoy life.
And if this was your favorite episode that you've ever listened to, be sure to let John know, let Ren know, post all about it.
And Instagram, and Ren too. Leave reviews.
Yes.
Any opportunity to annoy John, we take. If you haven't
Yes,
noticed,
leave all the reviews. If you haven't left a review and you like this episode, just say, I'm only leaving this review for this episode with Amber and Alex. And hopefully we can really cash and do a review on the next show and just read a bunch of reviews that
and
came
then we
in
can
from
print it and send it in a frame.
Yes, then we'll frame it, obviously, and we'll attach a James Clear quote to the bottom, and
Yes.
and we'll be great.
Yes. Perfect.
Well, thanks for having me on, Amber.
My butt today.
Yes. Thanks for reaching out to me. I was super happy to do it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And John and Ren's final words, jingle, jingle.
This is the Online Trainer Show. Trainer Show. Trainer Show. This is the Online Trainer Show. We shouldn't have a podcast.